We are the hub for news, results, and CEO interviews focusing the junior commodities sector. We provide market analysis and perspective that will help position you for solid returns.
Happy Friday, everyone. It's the last Friday of this January 2023. I think a lot of people will be happy to see it go. we launch ourselves forward into 2023. And of course, today we'll stop talking about the WF now. We're a little bit late because we switched from that Wednesday show. We wanted to change topics quickly. And we just wanted to talk about some of the key themes that are coming out of the risk report. Now, the risk report from the WF isn't necessarily claused in all of them, but it is about 1,200 different experts that they survey in their fields in different things and kind of give an overview, like a macro outlook for, blueprint for the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years of things to keep in mind. So let's maybe kind of jump into that before we talk about the big expectation for this year.
Yeah, so they kind of highlight, a number of different, what they would say today's crisis risks and then tomorrow's kind of catastrophes and stuff. And what we wanted to really kind of focus on was the resource sector of this. But glancing over it very quickly, they obviously talk about, climate action being one thing and societal polarization being another, cost of living crisis, economic downturn. So they hit a lot of the kind of major themes that are talking points as far as issues that are being faced, whether you're in Canada, the United States, or in Europe or anywhere else. You kind of see a lot of these same themes, and then diving into kind of their blueprint for tackling it.
Yes. Yeah. So, and that, it's a big report and there's lots of good in there, lots of what you'd expect. But that kind of talking about the change to our human health, security, digital rights, economic stability, all of these types of things are of key discussion in the report. And of course, the growing complexity in everything. This idea of like a poly crisis in a multipolar world. And in some degree, it's great to see, and it depends on how one defines things, this idea of globalism ending or hopefully coming to an end. Because to me, that whole notion of and I don't mean globalization, but globalism as an ideology of, promoting quote unquote diversity, but they weren't. What they're really doing is we're promoting a liberal progressive agenda and taking that to the world. And I don't want that. I want Japan to remain Japan, have its history, culture, and traditions. I want China to remain China, have its history, culture, and traditions. Every African nation, every European nation, and whatnot. I want people to love and respect what they've built. I don't want everyone to just be some big monolithic belief system, utopian, kind of melting pot, all believing the same thing. And it'll never happen anyway. The approach of universalism never works, and it can't. And it can't because we're different. And, what started off as a great idea of, be excited and celebrate someone's differences. They've gone so far that's so far off the table, and we need to push things back to go, we need to celebrate people's differences, enjoy them, and encourage people to find them and interact the best we can with them. We don't need to see everything eye to eye.
Yeah, you absolutely don't, because everyone's had different strategies and ways to go about their approach and their methods over the years. Some have been far more successful than others, depending on how you look at it as well. But I think it's important that the idea of globalism does kind of die off slowly. And I think in kind of even more mainstream circles now, it's being more talked about how, this totally interconnected global system isn't going to work. And, I will give maybe some credit to the COVID situation for kind of exposing that to some degrees of saying, hey, if everyone's doing these massive shutdowns, we can't keep everything running in this interconnected kind of way that we've been trying to do it here recently. So, the report lines out a lot of different areas and stuff, but one kind of key focus of it was this resource idea and the emerging futures of resources, and saying that conflict and, geotensions are going to trigger these interconnected global risks because that everything is so interconnected that, we're kind of dependent on, X resource from whatever country, and if we can't get our hands on it, then all of a sudden, our cost of obtaining that's going to go through the roof, or we're not going to be able to produce certain things. Like,
Yeah.
you remember about a year ago when no one could get a PlayStation because Sony wasn't able to get the microchips to make them.
Yes.
And there was a massive shortage around. Now, is that really going to be the biggest deal issue at the end of the day? No, I don't. I think we could have all lived a little longer without getting the new PlayStation. But the point remains that connectedness at any kind of slight little like blip in that supply chain can cause a massive effect on the other side.
Yeah, when you have so many moving parts, it only takes a mild issue in one to cause a catastrophic ending result. And when we look specifically at resources, even in their plans moving forward, they're still working with the ideology of using developing nations and taking their resources, letting them do it at whatever pace rate they feel like, while other countries look noble and not do it. And to me, that's a lot of people are noticing this hypocrisy. And I'll pick on Tesla just because it's like friendly and fun to do right now. And I've got a problem with Tesla, but I'll win some friends from saying this. They have sourced up until now, and it's still to this date, and lots of cell phones, Apple, you name it, all of their nickel and a lot of their resources from Indonesia. And we talked on the show, and we've had experts on the show talk to us and tell us they just dump, stuff in the water. They have not only they're not ESG, they're the furthest thing from it, but it's cheap. They can get out of the ground very nicely, very quickly, very well. And it goes to China. So you can't say anything because it's going to China. That model has to change. And we recognize that even if you clean up that in Indonesia, you have to then put it on a tanker and ship it back to the US for end use. That bunker fuel is catastrophic for the environment. So if you are taking in all of these metrics into account, you're better off to be mining in North America and Mexico and whatnot, and looking for resources there and getting them and developing them in as close to your industry as possible. And on top of that, we in the West need to be involved in industry again. We handed it off and it's backfired enormously. So this kind of critical change. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to just kind of agree with that point there. It's caused catastrophic issues. I mean, and that goes back to, the kind of complete decimation of the American middle class, and a reason that Trump's policies were so popular and bringing manufacturing back, and this idea of making America great again, that hits onto the same points, because we kind of sold off all our production to to China or Indonesia, you said, or the Congo is a massive one for cobalt and copper mining as well. So bringing that back, and that's kind of the argument I would make off of this is, there needs to still be interconnectedness, and we do need to work to avoid these rivalries, but you should be I think we should be looking, I'll say it from the Canadian perspective, let's really work and focus on building that relationship with the United States. We have a lot of resources the United States is going to need. They have a lot of companies that can come in and get those resources. Same the other way around. We talk about Desert Mountain having helium. Well, there's also helium in Saskatchewan. Both of our nations can supply a massive amount of this that's going to be needed going forward. So I think part of it's going to be building these relationships and avoiding these kind of conflicts head to head, but doing it, in your own sectors. Like, Europe should be working together to kind of meet all these needs. The African nations can kind of all work together. We can work with our closest allies, as far as I see them, in the United States and Mexico, to kind of hit all those needs as well.
And I mean, we have the reality of there being tensions in the world. Before 5 years ago, you'd have to be, asleep under a rock or just listening to mainstream news all the time, that you don't think that exists. As much as some people keep on trying to push how great China is, how great, it's going to be an issue sooner or later, and we'll leave it at that. But what's compelling, and what's also kind of multiplying the problem is, we take, for example, which was just posted yesterday. U.S. blocks the Twin Metals Copper Project. It's Antofagasta's major project. This thing has been in permitted since 1966. It's a huge copper nickel deposit. They can't get this thing done. It's been sitting there for 20 years. And I was actually talking to some guys at AIM yesterday about this project. And once again, they just shut it down, even though they're well aware that they are desperate for copper and nickel. Yeah. And you think, okay, so how, and part of it is that they just think it's not my problem. I'm not going to deal with it. I'm going to shut down this project and we'll just get it from somewhere else. And it is this NIMBY, not my backyard, that is so pervasive in one side's ideological belief system. And they get away with it for so long. Yeah. Is that if you're not willing to do something in your backyard, maybe you shouldn't do it. I mean, or you just, it's not worth doing. But this pretending that you're saving the world because you're recycling and you're in Vancouver, yet you don't have any strategy for how to involve mining and getting the metals that are going to be required for solar panels, for the wind turbines, for any of the solutions. It's ignorant. And I know the media wants us to stay that way, but we need to be more enlightened. And the great thing about the regulations we already have in Canada, we don't need more, is that they're, I would say, far too restrictive, but things can be done. It isn't this meme that you saw 10, 15, 20, 50 years ago. Things can be done properly and mitigated, especially with the oversight there is and it being well funded. This idea that it's such a disaster is not true. It's always evasive. I mean, mining or any kind of discovery is evasive, but we are left with very few solutions.
Do you think, like there's a bit of a question here for you, but do you think that there's a bit of political grandstanding to this as well? Like when you see a project like this that hasn't been given the go ahead, because it's not like, the U.S. hasn't made some steps, and we've given them credit, especially over the last 6 months for, trying to secure some of this supply. But you see it with, like a project like this, or another example I'd use would be like Keystone XL getting blocked. Do you think they pick some of these projects, these high profile ones, to just not allow to go through, to sort of like tip the cap to the, the environmentalist group of kind of the left and say, hey, look, we're doing this for you guys. And so some of these projects are just going to kind of get stuck because of this sort of political grandstanding?
Yeah, tons of projects get stuck because all you have to do is show a disaster site from 1950, send colorize it, put a photo, and go, that's going to be your lakefront property next year. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's very easy to do that. And a lot of these environmental groups are strange bedfellows. They're often funded by major oil and gas, sometimes by competitive companies, and they just don't know any better because they're not the swiftest, most critical thinking group. And that, as I say them, any fervent ideological structured belief system is very easy to sway and very easy to manipulate. And just as much as they are easy to manipulate other people, they also fall into that trap. It's tough, the crisis we're facing, but people need to come to terms with a lot of this. And what's great about this report, and they did a good job, was sourcing these minerals is going to become more difficult. And as we see in South America, countries nationalizing, stopping production, we're seeing that in Peru. That means less copper coming. What's your solution for that? The rest of the world is seeing the world is in flux and in chaos. And then that is the bigger conversation of this, the West versus, US versus China and Russia kind of deal. As that becomes more unstable, people need to find partners that they want to deal with. And that's the reality of it. Now, we wanted to focus in on the metals and the kind of the resources, because there's an opportunity for Canada to play a major role in this. And I know that people put out articles sometimes saying, well, the amount of reserves out there are very low. You go, well, yeah, it's true, because there's been a massive, shocking amount of underinvestment in mining, and not because miners didn't know or other, people were on TV 10, 12 years ago talking about electric future and how much copper you'd need. People have known that. It's just none of the politicians were listening.
Right.
And they're only starting to listen a little bit now. But the other thing you have to keep in mind is that most of them don't understand and don't know, and are just kind of haphazardly just trying to keep their political seat. But we need more of a unified voice from Canadians saying and acknowledging, like Australia, we are a resource-rich country. If we put some investment into that, some like R&D, like somewhere like Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, they're putting together massive funds, like in Dubai as well, to go simply look for metals. If we started to do that, we would move a lot from the inferred into the indicated, into a reserve very quickly. There are everyone knows there's tons of resources here. It's just we need to access them, but that also means you do it, with corporate stewardship. You do it environmentally friendly. We can do it. We just need all of the people to get behind it. And just like any kind of crowdfunding, if everyone said, "Yeah, I'd throw $1,000 at a mining company that had a direct deal with XYZ battery company that's helping to solve these problems, or their end user is a solar panel company or is fixing the electric grid," that's a heartwarming story that stays in line with your values and your vision. And it's a whole supply chain that we could sustain and we could grow without having to use massive cargo ships, using tons of bunker fuel, causing massive emissions. We could do it a lot cleaner.
Yeah, you absolutely can. And the level of standards that we have, and you mentioned this earlier, that we, that maybe they go a bit too far sometimes, but we should be able to take pride in saying, hey, look, we have the best standards in the world, and we can take, like, we're going to do this process as cleanly, as efficiently. Even, this with the Twin Metals project in Minnesota, been using some of the most advanced equipment in the world to be able to do this, to not cause this sort of irreparable harm that you would see in other countries and other jurisdictions. But again, it just kind of gets caught in the political landslide of everything, which makes it, until the politicians sort of start to really get their heads around this. And I think another thing is, until you can really get into the true, like, the hardcore kind of environmentalists and make them understand it as well, that's where you're going to start to see it making some ground, man.
Well, I'm going to say something a bit controversial here and say that you don't even bother wasting energy with them. Don't even waste your time and energy with them, because you're not going to convince them anyway. You might as well go to any kind of zealot and try to convince them of facts. They're not interested. So it's just, you have to focus more on those that are open to reality and critical thinking. And listen, I would consider myself an environmentalist. I love hiking. I love being out in nature, but there has to be a reasonableness to understand that technology has come a long way. And let me just say this in that regard, is to how much are you being manipulated by some of these groups. Is my generation will remember the BP spill. They made a movie out of it. It was a disaster. Now, that's hard to get out of one's head, and rightfully so, because the damage, it's horrendous. And, no one wants to see that, but that sticks in your head. Now, Nord Stream 2 being blown up was significantly bigger and worse, an ecological disaster. No one's out talking about it. There's not one environmentalist saying anything, because it doesn't fit the narrative of Ukraine and the West. Not a peep. That is so much worse, like on a scale that's hard to put into to fathom, compared to that BP disaster. Yet nothing. So go look at that if you want to know, how serious a lot of these people are about this. So take everything with a grain of salt. But what we really want to do is challenge people, not to challenge what I'm saying, but to go look and then kind of go, why is that? How come BP was such a disaster that they even made a movie? Well, they made lots of movies. But it was one of the Wahlberg guys was in it.
Yeah,
it
Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg. They made a huge movie. Like, I think it was something Horizon or something like that.
Deepwater Horizon. It's
Deepwater
actually a
Horizon.
good movie.
It is. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's scary, and it's and these things can happen, right? So no one's saying it can't, but it's just interesting that nobody follows up to want to talk about this one that's so much worse, because it just doesn't fit the narrative. So, once again, let's look at all these risks and kind of approach them with a thinking cap on, and remember that, and I don't care which side of the news you listen to, like, that's your mass media. It's being paid and influenced to influence us specifically in certain ways that those in power want. It's a long time ago. It's been decades since it's had any interest in truth or trying to find reasonable arguments to help lift up the people. It's not. It's all of it is trying to push a narrative. And one could argue that it's partly because of the internet and that people can go do their own research now. And that power, when you take the power away from those who have the messaging, they don't like it. It's not good.
Yeah, no, they definitely don't, and that's something that we've seen kind of change and progress because of this, the new technology age, and especially over the last 5 years in particular, the amount of people that have kind of come out and said, oh no, like, hey, this is actually how this story's going. It's not quite being shaped the way you are. I think it's caused a huge awakening in people, and I think that's a very good thing. Yeah. But it harkens back to a point as well of like, you always need to be kind of questioning and reevaluating and reanalyzing and updating your positions on these things. Otherwise, you're going to get caught in this line of thinking and then, stuck in that sort of that rut, as you can sort of say.
So, yeah. So it was something we wanted to highlight that was in this report. And I thought it was a decent report. And I'll just kind of end it off by talking about they have a 2-year and a 10-year, what they consider severity of short and long-term risks. I think it's pretty delusional. They have a lot of the climate change things. I'm happy to with the climate alarmist group is not factual. Of course, the climate's changing. It should be something that we take very seriously and focused on. But right now, like, they have the cost of living crisis. Yeah, that's a huge crisis. I would also agree that the geopolitical differences, that's a crisis. But we should have differences. Like, instead of trying to push everyone together, we should recognize that we're different and then foster that in an intelligent way. They have here natural disasters have been worse. No, they haven't. That's verifiably in the last 20 years, they haven't been worse. So we have to take these things with a grain of salt. We're going through this shift and this change. And we're just calling on people to be a bit more critical about it. And we wanted to highlight, especially with the critical metals, that Canada gets often forgotten in some of these big publications, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah, it absolutely should. But I mean, and then is that our own fault? And I would say to a large degree it is, because we haven't stepped up to the plate as far as being a global leader on that front. You hear our government a lot talk about wanting to be global leaders, and Canada's sets an example of being a standard for the world. Here's something where you can actually do that and actually have a very positive impact. So I'm going to keep harping on it until we see some real serious progress on that anyways.
Well, we certainly hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. But hey, look, I'm looking forward to getting out there. We're going to be at VRIC Sunday and Monday. If you see us there, come say hi. We'd love to chat to you. I'm excited to get out there with you guys this week. Andrew, it's going to be really good. Any final thoughts for today?
We're making some changes. So we're going to do some small twists and turns this year ahead. Some interesting things coming up. We're getting a lot more traction with our videos. We're probably going to do less live stuff, and we're going to do more set videos, because that seems to be getting a lot more traction. And then also we're going to be introducing a lot more of the invite to Zooms, where it's not quite live. Like, I'll be live and I'll be talking to you, but that way it'll be more interactive. We can have discussions with people that can send in questions, and it's not necessarily recorded. So we can really, really engage those that want to and have them separate discussions behind the scenes. So that's what we're building on right now for our key kind of members and key people that like these conversations but want to get into them a bit more.
Yeah, and because it gives us more of an ability to kind of have an open discussion, whereas right, we're trying to fit something into a 20 or 25-minute block. There's only so much you can kind of dive into. So it gives us the opportunity to really sort of grab onto these topics and explore them in depth. Yeah,
because we're lucky. I mean, I get emails from people all the time from various different backgrounds and sectors, and they'll just throw out things like, "Oh, I liked that point on this, but hey, have you looked at this?" And I mean, that's what we love, because it's something I may not have thought of, and I go, "Oh my God, that's so interesting!" And send me a link or send me this or point me in the right direction. So we want to engage more of that and encourage more of that. So you send us your feedback still, and we think this is going to be a lot better, because we'd rather be in kind of tight groups with, 30, 40, 50 people and actually kind of sharing ideas. That's more what we're going towards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it. So hope everyone has a great weekend. If you haven't, I'm going to do the normal plug I always do. Like
Yes,
the video,
please.
subscribe to the channel. We greatly appreciate it, guys. It helps us out so much. Hope everyone has a fantastic weekend, and we'll chat to you all next week.
Take care.